Hello, and welcome to the Fear Channel, a channel with regular broadcasts telling the most chilling of urban legends, ghost stories, and forays into the darkest corners of the human mind. Those faint of heart or prone to night terrors should proceed at their own risk. Tonight's story is The Strange Man.
I've always had an overactive imagination. I'm an artist, and I was diagnosed with ADHD as a child. Never medicated, though, so my mind was constantly everywhere, and I was always drawing as a kid. My imagination would do terrible things to me sometimes, probably a result of watching horror movies at a young age. Scary shit lurked around every corner. But on one occasion, I knew it wasn't just my imagination. I was in the 6th grade at the time, probably 12 or so, and I lived in a small town near a major highway, like seriously small. The only major thing the town burnt to hell 20 years ago. Then a kid died in the high school, so it was condemned. The only major landmarks here were the cemetery, the lake, the post office, the gas station, and all of this was on about 4 blocks of town. Another strange thing about the place is that in the early 1900s, it was booming. Now it's just a dusty old ghost town with about 40 people living there. People who never spoke or went outside. The only other kids there were my best friends, and there were only 3 of us, and every morning we walked together to the bus stop, though none of us spoke on most days. One morning it was foggier than usual. I remember it was cold and a little misty out. My uncle, who's now deceased, grew up here, and he always told me these fucked up stories about the town. He always reminded me to watch myself, and that strange shit was going on here. But he was always kinda loony, so I didn't worry about it most of the time. This morning felt off. I wasn't too stressed because I knew the others would be walking up soon, but when they didn't, I started freaking out. I stood there alone at my bus stop, and my imagination started going wild. I was in the middle of imagining a set of eyes in the mist, when from about 10 feet away from me to the left, I remember seeing something walking. This was absolutely real. I remember every detail. It was a man, at least in shape and stature. But the way it walked seriously makes my bones numb. Slow and rhythmic, like it was floating almost. My 12-year-old eyes bulged out of my skull, and I remember freezing in terror. Good God, I can't even stop shaking now. Then he looked at me. Fucking looked directly at me. Eyes. His eyes. They were so far apart they were almost on the side of his head, which was oblong. It's kind of like a sideways egg, but not quite as long. And he had a small nose in the center. Absolutely hairless. No hair. Just dirty, pale white skin, with crooked, jagged yellow teeth underneath a disgusting smile. I've heard descriptions of ghouls before, and I've wondered if maybe that was what I saw, but they never sound exactly the same. He didn't leave me until the headlights of the school bus came over the hill. Then, without taking his eyes off me, he raised one hand and waved. But not like a goodbye wave. More like a I'll see you around type of wave. Then he started to walk slowly away from the spot where he stood. Almost in slow motion. It felt like it took an eternity for him to get away. When the bus pulled up, I was crying. The driver had to call the school, who then called my mom to come and pick me up. I tried telling her what I saw, but she didn't believe me. She said it was probably just a guy in a mask screwing around with me. I knew it wasn't. I know it wasn't because for the next 5 years of my life, he was there, watching me, and almost enjoying our time together, like he was watching his favorite TV show. For the first few months, his appearance sent me into a terrible frenzy of crying and screaming, and my mom, who was single most of my childhood, worked 2nd and 3rd shifts to keep our house. She was never around in the afternoon or night to watch me, so I never had anyone to talk to. I was frightened and alone so much. Whenever I would see him, I would call my grandma and talk to her on the phone, hoping he would see this and think I was trying to call the cops or something. I don't know. I was 12 or 13. I would shut the blinds and watch TV and try not to think about it. He only would make appearances once a week, so it wasn't an everyday kind of thing. Then at some point I remember that I realized he never came near me or touched me or anything. He just stood there, watching me, whether it was outside my windows or in the cornfield just beyond the fence of the playground at school. It took some time, but I remember I got used to him. And after a while, he was like scenery in the background. Whenever I would go on trips or vacations, I knew he wasn't there. It was only around this small town. On one instance, I think I was 15 or 16, I went on a walk with a friend of mine. We were together walking near the edge of town where the paved road turns into gravel. That's where the cemetery is. And that's when I saw him. He was about 100 yards away, leaning casually up against a gravestone. I asked my friend while keeping an eye on him, "Hey, want to go into the graveyard?" He was down, so we went in. It had become obvious to me that he wasn't visible to anyone other than myself. So it wasn't a shock when I went up near him and my friend didn't say anything. Now that I think about it, that was probably the closest I'd ever been to him. He was so much more detailed this close. His skin, Christ, I'll never forget it. It was almost translucent. He wasn't just pale, he was old. And he was staring directly into my eyes. His eyes, they were green, not black, I remember. Green with a hint of yellow and brown. He had pretty eyes, but they were so beady and far apart. I had forgotten about my friend when he said, "Why are you just staring there at that gravestone?" I looked over at my friend, and then back at the strange man. But he wasn't there anymore. Just an old weathered slab of tall concrete. I looked over it for a second. Then I noticed there was a name and a date. I'll spare the name for privacy's sake, but the person lived from 1846 to 1874. I paid no attention to this for a long time, until I noticed that every time I was in the graveyard, there he was. Same pose, same stone, watching me. One day I was reading a book on the paranormal when I thought about something. Maybe he was just a ghost, and maybe he wanted me to help him. So I came up with a plan. I rode my bike to the graveyard, and I approached him, standing there as usual, and I said, "Can you hear me?" He just looked, blank face. "No?" No response. "If you need my help, tell me." Then he seemed to get angry. I don't remember exactly what happened. All I remember is that I ran. I ran and didn't look back until I was far away on my bike. And then when I got to my bike, I turned. He was standing there, still at the gravestone, with one arm stretched out to me, like he was reaching for me. He wanted me to come back, like he was sorry or something. I don't know. I didn't stick around for much longer to find out. I rode as fast as I could home, and that was the last time I saw him for a while. A few months went by, and I started to get really anxious, avoided being alone, and avoided going out after dark. I was so scared I would see him again, but at the same time, I felt bad, like I shouldn't have upset him. I felt sorry for him. It's weird, but I kind of felt like we were friends. I still feel like we were friends. It took a while, but the next time I saw him again was while I was riding the bus to school. I no longer had to walk to the bus stop, though. I was in high school, but I know it was him. He was walking, or dancing more, down the sidewalk, but it was only a quick glance. He watched me go past him. I knew he knew I was there, and that was it. His appearance became less and less frequent, until one night. The last night I've ever seen him. I was 17 years old and my mom had announced we were moving. Things had gotten serious with her boyfriend, and we were moving in with him. Our boxes were being packed, and the house was on the market. It was about midnight, and I was alone in the house as usual. I was drawing in the living room. I had my supplies laid out in front of me, and I was going to town on the paper when I saw something move out of the corner of my eye. It was him, but this was a first. He was in my house. My first reaction was to scream. He took a step back. I remember this as being a strange moment. I was quiet, and he seemed scared. We watched each other for a moment. Then I realized I had nothing to fear, and I went back to drawing. He moved about for a while and would stand behind me. It was like he wanted to watch me draw. So I let him for a while. Then he moved himself in front of me. He just stood there, looking not at my sketches, but at me. I'm not sure how long this lasted, but at some point I realized he must have wanted me to draw him. So I did. I started slowly, but eventually it was normal. I just sat there drawing this being, this strange thing that had followed me for damn near 5 years. And when I was done, I held up my notebook. He seemed to be happy. He seemed to be completely ecstatic, actually. His smile seemed bigger, as odd as that was, and his eyes seemed more kind. I'm pretty sure I smiled too. He liked it. I have absolutely no idea how long we stayed that way, but eventually he turned away from me and walked into another room. And then he was gone. Forever. My mom and I moved and went on with our lives. I'm 20 now and living on my own. And I wish with everything inside of me I didn't leave that notebook with my mother, because it's probably in storage somewhere now. I wish I could show you guys that drawing, but it's not here at my apartment. So I did this for you all. It's him, his image forever burned into my skull.